Hello everyone, this is Jimmy Cultist, and today we're going to talk about how to set up a cutscene as requested by one of our viewers. First thing you're going to want is good puppet movement control for cutscenes. I prefer 25% deceleration and 25% acceleration. I also prefer walkable slope angle to be 90%. As for the running speed and all that, I tend to think it'd be 4 and 0.8 for walk speed. Also, don't forget to turn off the motion sensor movement unless you want the puppet to move with the controller. Turn off auto look, probably won't be needing that. There are of course exceptions. And label them whatever they're going to be depending on what they're going to interact with. In this case, I don't think I'm going to label it anything. Most of the time, they don't require a lot of logic for cutscenes. Now you will want something to mount your cameras from. I kind of advise making the chip small, although you want to put it in an area where you can easily see it, so it won't get lost among a bunch of other logic. You can label it, make it have an icon like a camera, really helps. Call it cutscene. And you may be wondering, why is it small better? Well, it's because when you put a camera on logic like this, cameras in general are kind of hard to see through, like they block your field of vision. And if the chip is nice and small, you'll have a nice and small camera. However, if the chip is large, you'll have a camera like this that could potentially block out your entire puppet. So yeah, keep it small. And here we have the various, things that you're going to want to mess around with. I would say there is one little thing, like hide imps is a prerequisite in most cases. I would definitely turn that on for your camera. We're not going to be using this camera, of course. And the best way to clip together any kind of cutscene is to use a timeline. Either set to sustain or play once. Loop is no good unless you just want this thing going over and over again for some reason. I don't know why you would ever want that. But here is our little timeline. I guess we'll make it a little bit bluer so that it stands out. And we'll just go ahead and do a quick, simple test. If you wanted a cutscene to zoom in on a character, We're also going to disable controls for now, although that's not really necessary. That'll basically mean the player can't interact with anything while the cutscene is playing. But the camera will just naturally focus in on the puppet if you have transition time. Now I think what is better is if you want to zoom in on a puppet, just press cut, which basically eliminates transition time. Pull it out, then pull this in, and it will automatically, go through it. And you can set how long you want it to take. And you may have to increase its length on the timeline with R2 if you have to. Let's give that a try and see what that looks like. And once it's reached its full transition time, it'll just remain in place and hold the shot. This is something you can test out, and mess around with. I also advise, if your cutscene is a separate scene from a playable level, or if you're just transitioning, to have a little wiper. And all a wiper does is create a transition. For instance, if you set a color on, you can also set fade in time and fade out time, which controls, the differences between transitions. I'm also going to show you a little trick for how you can put your puppet right where you need it. And we are going to label him friend, just to demonstrate this particular aspect. And we're going to take out a teleporter, label it play, that's not player. Player Tilly There we go. And now this teleporter will follow a tag labeled the same thing. So if you want to have your player instantly jump to a certain position in the scene, this is the best way to do it, in my opinion. Quickest way. Oh, don't forget to add tally and make it lowercase. Always have your tags match up with their targets. And we'll move it down to about here. It might require some testing to get the right position. Depends. And we're just going to test the ability to trigger a cutscene. I think a good idea is to put a counter in the scene. Just hook it up. Have a zone. Label it to detect friend. We might want a few landmarks so that we can kind of see where our puppet is moving around. Oh, another thing. When designing a puppet for a cutscene, I would advise highly making sure that it's not really a problem with the basic puppet, but make sure everything is non-collidable, because collidable assets interfere with the animations and such. Like if you want to have the puppet wave its arms and it's got a collidable wristband, that wristband's going to get hung up on stuff in the environment. It's going to get hung up on the puppet. It's better just to animate based around collision. Like if you want it to collide with something, animate the hand stopping at the surface. Don't like actually depend on real collision to prevent these things from happening. Because then you're at the mercy of the physics to properly get the scene you want, and that's kind of very risky. I would not advise it. I remember I used to do that in the old days, and then they would update Dreams, and suddenly everything would go wonky, so don't do that. Inadvisable. And I'm going to create some basic landmarks just so we know the position of the puppet, like he's walking through the doorway. Kind of looks like that one episode of Star Trek. Now that transition time was not fast enough. I would definitely speed it up. And I would increase the range of this so that we kind of, you know... Another thing to keep in mind is you would want to limit your puppet's ability to get in here. Like, you kind of would want it so that he can only go through the distinguished area where you want the cutscene to play out, or a general zone. Like if you're in the center of a coliseum, you know, having a zone in the middle of it probably wouldn't hurt. But if you're in like a narrow corridor, you probably want him to only approach it from one direction. Still not playing quick enough. Just pull the timeline back. That's what we've got going wrong. And if you're like, oh, how would I get him to, you know, let's say I want him to run forward. It's like simple. Just take an action recorder. If I even remember how these work. Oh yeah, possess puppet mode is what we want. Just nudge it forward. Set it to loop. Set it to keep changes. Don't set it to travel, though. Well, maybe you do want it on travel, now that I think about it. But this will basically make it so that he walks forward when we need him to. And you'll notice it's a little janky. And you're like, well, isn't there a better way to do this, Jimmy? There is, and I'm glad you asked, because we have this. The Follow Me button. Just set it to something like go here. That's my favorite. We better set the inner radius pretty low, because we want him to go exactly where the tag is, pretty much. Set it to 0.5. And all you gotta do in this case is just take out a little tag, set it to go here, and put it a little bit forward and he'll walk right out of that doorway. Yeah, he must have reached it too early. We'll put it a little bit further ahead. See, experimentation is necessary. Yeah, he's still stock still. Oh, we put it on player telly. Don't know why we did that. Go here is what we want it to be. And we can move this further back now that we've realized our error. I think we also might move the teleporter back to about here. Make it so that he kind of smoothly, you know... Actually, we could put it even further back. Don't think anybody would notice. Yeah, let's try this out. There you go. Nice and smooth. You can also adjust the camera, you know, based off the new position he's going to be occupying. But little stuff like that helps. Also, another thing, if you want your puppet to be doing animations during a scene and you notice that, like, well, let's just do an example real quick. By the way, speaking of action recorders, there were a lot more thermo-friendly, you know, when you put them on keyframe mode, but personally I think they suck for cutscenes, and I still prefer the old methodology, just because it's easier to control and realign. And reposition, that's the big thing. If you want to take an animation out and put it into another animation, you can't really do that with the action recorder, so it's kind of stupid. I mean, it's good. I think it's best for, like, gameplay animations, like if you want to, you know, slash something with a sword, I think it's really good for that. We'll just set these keyframes to linear blend. Set this one kind of long so that he goes into this animation. I just want to demonstrate something real quick. Now you'll notice his feet. They were kind of weirdly sticking into the floor, and you're like, how do I prevent that, Jimmy? Well, here I would use an action recorder, because we're just going to have it static. And I would set it to keyframe mode, but basically what causes that is this stuff called procedural animation and procedural walk. Turn these off. Oh, one thing you might want to do is press reverse scene before recording, otherwise the action recorder is going to be messed up. At least if you have it on a timeline. If you record outside the timeline, it's not a big deal. It won't do that weird thing where it flips ahead. I usually make anything that shuts stuff off gray just to differentiate it from, you know, other things. But this should get rid of his feet sticking through the floor like they did earlier. Yeah, kinda did, kinda didn't. Alternatively, if you want to fix this, there's also this method. It definitely, in most cases, it is good to turn off the procedural animation if you're doing specific animations, you know, where the player's going to be doing a lot of things on the floor or whatever. Like if you want them to roll around or something, like, let's say he's being shot at and then he, you know, he dives to the side or something. Probably would take way more animations to get this right. I don't think we're going to do it in just 3. But I gotta, you know, keep things brief. But if you want him to get on the floor or whatever, these feet will be having all sorts of trouble colliding with the floor, like they'll get all messed up when he's in a position like that. And we're going to demonstrate how that would look without, you know, let's go ahead and play it. Let's get a good view of what's going on with his feet too. So we're going to change the camera angle with a quick cut. So that we can get a view of what's going on with the feet. Notice that? Like, that is wonky as heck. And all you gotta do is pull this forward, and that will stop happening. Turn off the procedural animations, and it'll sit there. And if you want to, you know, transition out of the cutscene, just have it so that it's long enough that it hides his animation resetting to 0. And he's back to normal. You're out of the cutscene. You could even reposition him, like say he gets thrown up against the wall and you want him to appear over there. Just set the player telly, you know, have the animation, of course. Have all that animation play out. And then just take the player telly, move it over toward the wall. It's like he gets thrown up against the wall. I'm not actually animating that, but you know. There he is. He's over against the wall. You could even have him come up out of an animation if you wanted. Like, you could set this right here. Say he gets thrown up against the wall and he's dazed. And be sure to pull it forward just a little bit. You don't want to overlap with the other one. We'll just have him sitting on the ground. Also, be sure to turn off the HUD. Usually what I have is like a keyframe, you know, action recorder similar to this one. And whatever HUD items he has, like if he has text displayers, I would have them all in a chip. Like this. And I would probably label it HUD, but we're in a hurry. You know, like, I'll just say this is his HUD. Blah, blah, blah. Like this is his health bar, and this is his Dougal indicator, you know, whatever you want. I would just have this, you know, I would have this keyframe. And I would have a trigger zone hooked up to it, labeled, you know, set to tag. And I would probably label it something like HUD off. And if you set it to in scene, anytime a tag appears in the scene, it would turn off the HUD. So HUD off, like so. Set it to the full end of the timeline. And we're going to go ahead and finish up our little, you know, getting off the floor animation. We'll take this keyframe. It's blank, so he'll just reset to his average position. And we're going to go ahead and test out everything. HUD off. Presumably he gets thrown up against the wall, didn't animate that, but you know. Gets back up, HUD is back in play, and the cutscene won't trigger anymore because the tag is off. If you wanted it to only trigger once, you know, like say you don't want this to ever play again, I would have a variable. I'm sorry, this is the only way. I would probably limit these kind of cutscenes because, you know, a variable, doing it over and over again isn't very nice. Variable, I'm gonna call it cut over. Then I'd take out a destroyer. You don't necessarily have to do this, I just think it's an easy way to get rid of the situation. Affected objects, the trigger zone, and we just have a nice little variable at the very beginning called cut over. Did we capitalize? We did not. That's good. Set the value, operation value to 1 and set it to add. Make sure you do that. Okay. You'll regret it otherwise. Basically, this just guarantees that once the cutscene is played, it will never play again. Because you'll enter the scene, and this variable will be triggered, the destroyer will be on, and it'll turn this off, and this switch ain't gonna go on by itself. It's only gonna go on if there's something to trigger it. So if there's no, you know, thing anymore, it's gone. Now you may be asking, why didn't you just connect the destroyer to the cutscene? Because that would destroy our animation and our fade out time, and that would be kind of janky. You just suddenly, whoop, it's all over, the cutscene is gone. I don't think that would be good. But yeah, that's like a lot of different stuff you can use for cutscenes. I'm also going to go into one final thing, which is how to skip a cutscene. For this, we're going to have to actually allow controller sensor input. And alternatively, what you're going to want to do is simply make it so that Action Recorder just turns off your puppet interface. That's going to make it so that you can't pull off any of these sweet moves, you know, like if you want to move around or jump or even activate buttons. What I would have is a tag, not a tag, but a chip. And I'd basically have all of your controller inputs go through this chip. Like if you want to use R1 to draw the sword, I would stick it in this chip, and I would just have turn off HUD. Not HUD. Turn off the HUD. Yes, turn it off. But if you turn off this chip, it will disallow all controller inputs like, you know, slashing with the sword and all that kind of stuff. So that's an easy way to use, you know, use this same piece of logic that turns off your HUD, also make you turn off your controls. That's pretty good. It doesn't include QuickTime events. Maybe that would be a different situation. But yeah, that would just limit your ability to, you know, do that. And you would just have a handy little skip button. That'd probably be something like this. I might even label it skip. Now there's a way you can do it where you just tap one button and it instantly skips, but a lot of people prefer to have the ability to hold it down because it's sort of a problem where people skip cutscenes by accident. This isn't something I tend to do in video games, but apparently people have got their hands all over the controller and are just willy-nilly, you know, pressing things. We'll set it to speed, I think. Let's give that a try. Also set it to remote controllable. Speed is not what you want. Positional. You want it so that when you stop, it goes back down. Good. And we're probably going to set it to 1 minute. Let's see how fast that would be. Yeah, that's probably still a little fast for someone with grubby fingers. 2, I think, is a good setting. And you may be wondering, well, how can I indicate that a cutscene is skippable? Well, just take out a text displayer and do something kind of like this. I don't think that's how you spell circle. Is it? It can't be. That's how you spell circle. Then you put a little thing next to it that's like, skip. How you design this is your own business. I would probably kind of make the text box just, I would want it to be unobtrusive for the most part. And down in the corner here. And then I would want it so that when you press the button, it gets bigger to indicate that you're, pressing down on it. Just take timer output, stick it in the keyframe, and it should automatically, do the thing. Now you're probably wondering, like, how would I go about skipping this? I would just have a little timeline, wherever it is you want the player to be. Just stick a little thing in there. Basically just what would ordinarily be the end of your cutscene. And a camera to redirect people's interest, like over here. Everything in position. Looks like it's there. Timer finished pulse. Set to play once. And indeed, we do want the variable, because you still want to count it as seen, technically. And you're like, well, how am I going to limit this from happening? Won't I just be able to skip all the time? It's like, well, we'll look it up to counter full. Of course, that does bring up another issue, which is if counter full is on, won't this be popping up all the time? Yeah, I think I know what we can do. We'll just put this little handy thing right here. And a node. The reason why we're putting the node is so that if this gets destroyed, it, still won't be going through the node. And I think this should do nicely at resetting all of our logic. Of course, we are going to need another destroyer. You can relabel these if you want to. Cutscene, skip. If you're having trouble keeping track of what they do, go into affected objects and just going to remove that thing from reality. We are going to want a little switch in here, of course. And probably label it red so that you can tell it, if you have any other switches active. And let's just go through here and skip this cutscene. Of course, that cutscene wasn't very long, so skipping it was kind of like almost the breadth of the cutscene. Let's try one just to demonstrate a little better how the skip function works. You also might want the you might want this thing set to be slightly later, and you might want the transition time on this wiper to be slightly shorter, like the fade in time. Make it 1. That probably would make it a little bit more. And set the camera ahead, because the camera is like cutting to that position way before we want it to. There we go. I'm not sure how we depossessed our puppet. Yeah, how did we depossess him exactly? Is this thing set properly? Yeah, it's set properly. We're not turning this off. Oh, it's pressing circle. Yeah, just be sure, because circle is automatically from the very beginning connected to depossess. So you would just delete that. I would also, you know, do that anyway, because in most games you can't depossess the character. So just keep that in mind. But that's how you would skip a cutscene and how you'd put one together. And there's of course lots of involved things you could do, you know, like lots of transitionary things. There's lots of camera settings too that you can mess around with. Like if you want this to be more cinematic, we have this display black bars on here. You know, that would make it more like that. Looks a little bit more flashy that way. Another thing we have, I'm going to go ahead and open up the logic before we scope into our camera, is we have focus distance and aperture. And using this, you can blur out things in the background or foreground. And that's kind of cool, you know? That kind of like makes it really professional. Anyway, hopefully you found this useful. We're going to give a quick shout out to our monthly supporters on Coffee. There are their names. Wonderful people. And that's all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. If you wish to support our earnest insanity, you can check the links in the description to donate or buy merch. Until next time, goodbye.